There you go, that should have started.
Brilliant. There we go. Yeah, I think just a few more people are coming in, but we'll make a start because we've got quite a packed agenda today. Yeah, just wanted to welcome everyone to our webinar hosted by us, ASUM Wales. I know we've got quite a mix of attendees today, so mostly sort of in education or around that, but we're going to be looking today at how schools have implemented our trauma-informed practices, TrACE toolkit, which I'll be explaining a little bit more in a moment. Just some sort of housekeeping rules. As I just said, if people could keep their mics off unless speaking, and their cameras, up to you. You can turn them off if you want, or you can leave them on. Any questions for any of our speakers today, or any questions that come out, if you could add them to the chat, and we'll try and answer them as we go along. But if not, if we're not able to, I'll try and get back to you and message you individually afterwards. Just because, like I said, we've got quite a packed agenda today and quite a lot to get through. Okay, so I'll make a start. Okay. basic compassion and kindness towards them. Then you'd have your sort of trauma skills level, where you're looking at people who are a bit more front-facing. So again, in a sort of school setting, it would be your teachers, your support staff. They might have a few more skills as well of how to sort of help children dysregulate. They might be using emotion coaching as well. Then your sort of trauma-enhanced level, which is your so maybe your welfare officers or people who are trained that little bit more, well-being support staff, and then your specialist interventions, who might be your education psychologists, so people might come into the school setting who are more sort of, again, that sort of maybe upskilled a little bit more. And again, a lot of the schools that we sort of work with, this is nothing new. You know, it's just sort of showing that sort of spectrum there, that those people of where the sort of, and it's not really a hierarchy, but where people might sit, and a lot of training that's already out there fits into this really nicely. So I know a lot of people have done the trauma-informed schools diploma, which would sit again in that sort of trauma-enhanced level, to sort of, you know, thrive or nurture schools. All these sort of fit in quite nicely with that. We'll be looking a little bit more about some of the resources we've got to sort of support your school in this way, especially around the sort of the trauma aware and trauma skilled. I know lots of people have done the tips for children and young people, which is our colleagues at TrACE Wales have been running, and that sits really nicely in that sort of the trauma skills and trauma enhanced level as well. So just a quick sort of note on our some of our resources that are available on Hub at the moment. We've got the Adverse Child Experience Phase 1 and Phase 2 playlist. If you go onto Hub and search for ACE Hub Wales or ACEs, it'll come up. You don't need a Hub account to access this. Anyone can go onto there and find it. And I'll pop a link into the chat shortly, so people can see this and go on there themselves. And on it's just a playlist with a list of resources that hopefully schools or any sort of settings can go on and use the TrACE toolkit, which I'll talk a little bit about in a moment, and in their own settings. So on there, it's just a bit about the background about what ACE Hub Wales is. Then we've got some trauma-informed Wales. So our Phase 1 learning is the e-learning. So to go back to our, jump back quickly to our trauma-informed practice levels, this is the sort of the trauma-aware level that you'd hope sort of everyone within a setting would have an awareness of this. We have got on our ACE Hub Wales website a training module, an e-learning training module, which is about 50 minutes long. And this just sort of gives a general sort of overview of ACEs, the impact of stress and trauma on development, the impact of ACEs on across the life course, and how resilience and protective factors and sort of trauma-informed practices can help sort of support people and sort of mitigate the impact of those ACEs. So it's just a really good sort of general overview on ACEs that we hope for that sort of that trauma-aware level that people can use. So again, a lot of the schools that sort of worked with have sort of given this as sort of staff training. Yeah, and it sort of sets off that sort of Phase 1 learning. On our Hub resources as well, we've got the Phase 2. There's primary, which is a video of a slide deck, and there's one for primary schools and one for secondary schools, and they're all available in Welsh as well. And on that sort of goes into a little bit more like a refresher on ACEs and the impacts of trauma. It talks about meta-emotion philosophy and goes into a lot of emotion coaching as well then, and how those sort of strategies can be sort of used in the classroom, and sort of examples of how to do this with young people as well. Uses of PACE or place from Dan Hughes, not Dad Hughes, we've written there, but Dan Hughes, and talks about the window of tolerance from Dan Siegel, and also talks about sort of self-care and the importance of self-care within the teachers and the staff within the school, and also talks about how we can teach resilience that helps sort of build up and sort of protect those protective factors around young people as well. So those sort of resources are on there. They're all free and for anyone to access. The case study is also on there now. That's just gone up today. We've got, like I said, the brilliant work from a school Penrose and Whitmore. I don't want to go too much into it now because Joe and Maria are going to tell us all about this in a moment. But it really sort of complements the toolkit as well, and shows that really good practice that they've put into place. It also links into our sort of toolkit and our domains, and what Jo Maria did as we sort of retrofitted this. We sort of gone in and done the toolkit, and I know they've done a lot of work with other organisations and other training involved with that as well. But they've sort of gone in and sort of shown how the toolkit can sort of support schools in highlighting good practice on there as well. It also looks back at those practice principles we talked about a little bit earlier that should underpin all of the work that the schools are doing, and how what they do and links up to those practice principles. It's a really good piece of work, and should help any schools wanting to use this toolkit to sort of see what they're doing and look at good practice. So just a little bit about the TrACE toolkit, because hopefully that we sort of mentioned a few times through this. The TrACE informed organisations, it's not set specifically for schools or education, but any organisation should be able to pick this up and use it. And like I said, at ASEB Wales, we worked a lot with lots of different organisations, from third sector charities, criminal justice services, social care, housing, who have helped sort of implement these the TrACE toolkit. So in order to do this, just a sort of quick overview of it really, is there's 4 steps to this. So a lot of it is about preparation and how you sort of prepare your sort of organisation and look at how you're going to do this, which we'll have a look at in the moment. Then step 2, there's a self-assessment toolkit, where we don't sort of offer sort of accreditation like some others, that instead we sort of feel that this should be sort of embedded throughout, and an ongoing thing that should constantly be sort of monitored and evaluated and sort of improved upon as it goes along. So we don't sort of offer accreditation for this, and we sort of, at the moment, we're sort of supporting a lot of schools and places with this, where I come in and support them and help them with this. But our sort of ultimate goal is to have enough resources in there that schools can sort of pick this up and evaluate it themselves. Then is the action and implementing stages, where they might sort of come up with an action plan of how they're going to do this, or what changes need to be made, what good practice might need to be shared, or sort of make sure it's embedded across the entire school. And then finally, monitoring and evaluation. Really quickly, it's the readiness review, that first part, the step 1, the preparation phase. We're looking, if we've got time at the end, we'll look a little bit how schools have sort of used this, but it's really important that if they are going to use this, the TrACE toolkit that we have, that they sort of plan first of all, and it's not just left to sort of one person in that organisation to do it all. It's often setting up a small sort of steering group, a group of people, with lots of different viewpoints of that sort of organisation or that school, that can sort of input into this and sort of get the best results from it. Also, you're looking at things like timescales. Is this going to be done over a year, over a school year, over a term, over a half term? How that information is going to be sort of disseminated out. How people are going to sort of monitor and evaluate and review this, and it's all good to sort of sit down and go through this at the start and sort of plan this out. And we've found that organisations, especially larger organisations, find that having this approach at the start and sort of planning it out is much easier in the long run. Then we have the self-evaluation toolkit, which has got 6 domains, 6 sort of areas. So governance, leadership, and organisational culture. So checking that we've got the governance there and the leadership of wanting to use trauma-informed approaches. Checking that policies and procedures put in place in that organisation are trauma-informed. That the workforce training and support, again, that there's some sort of element of training around trauma-informed practices, ACEs and trauma. Put in there the physical environment itself to make sure that it's not impacting people with trauma, and the service design and delivery part of that. I mean, from a sort of school education point of view, that's the sort of how you're teaching and learning essentially, and then the monitoring evaluation part of it as well. Then of checking about how we're going to be monitoring the impact of this. So again, this is not based sort of directly at schools, but just at sort of any organisation. But it fits in really well there, and each sort of part of this has several questions just to sort of start conversations and think. Now, a lot of the schools that I've worked with so far doing this have already done so much good work. There's a lot of really good sort of work going on in there anyway. And I think with when completing this, it's good to be sort of as reflective as possible, really, and honest as possible. But it's nothing new, as in lots of schools are starting this and think, oh yeah, we do this, we do that, yeah, we got this and that. But it's really nice to see those sort of how things might be done differently, how sort of good practice might be shared, how something might be working really well in one area of the school, how that could be sort of implemented, or just some fresh ideas or sort of a different take on things. So from that, we look at then creating an action plan. And the action plan from there might be looking at those different domain areas, looking at some sort of changeable things that we can sort of pick out and work across the school. And like I said, this should be sort of an ongoing thing that's constantly referred back to, changed and developed, and sort of built into into the plan, really, looking at those measurables as well. So the monitoring, evaluation and reviewing. So how is this making an impact? How can the school build into the service user feedback? How can they build into sort of cultural change, and just sort of checking that this is making an impact and it is having an impact on things. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing. That was a really quick view of our sort of TrACE and the resource that we've got. We're going to be sort of mentioning throughout this sort of throughout the webinar. Yeah, and it's just sort of giving people a bit of an idea. We'll pop some of these things into the chat as well, into the resource so that you can see them. But I think it'd be great now to hear from some of the schools who have been putting this into place, and some of those. I was wondering if Joe is ready. Joe is here. That he could, if he wants to have a chat or wants to share his things, I will let Joe go from there.
Yeah, I'm trying to share my screen now. Oh, this one there is. I've got it. Okay. Well, Prenanda Bao. There we go. Excellent. Right. So my name's Dr. Joe Cudd. I'm the head teacher at Ysgol Penrhos, a dual stream primary school in Llanelli. So okay, David, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Joe. That's brilliant.
Okay, good. Right. That's right. It's a very large primary school in an area of significant and severe deprivation in West Wales, Llanelli. I've been doing quite a lot of work in the ACEs field for a while because it's a very complex community we're dealing with. So that's the one of the things I wanted to pick up. Dave was talking about feedback and cultural change. That's our foyer, or part of our foyer. It was a welcoming school to come into. And if anyone on the call is in a school or wants to come and visit us, then you can see and feel this, because you have to see and feel it. It's quite hard to do it online. So I'll just share with you some of the things that we've gone through. I have noted with David, I have to can't stay for the whole of the meeting because I have to go to hospital to get something sorted out. So that's Ysgol Penrhos in Llanelli, and let's just get the next slide up then. This was the hardest bit, if there are schools on the call, is getting the commitment to create a safe, supportive and trauma-aware environment. When we started this piece of work, we didn't really appreciate the levels of trauma that were in our adult population within the school. So we had to work our way through that. So there are several responses to what we did in dealing with that, because our school community as adults was experiencing trauma. The toolkit and the resources that David has showed are excellent. And in terms of service design for us as a school, I can share with you the future that we've developed in the last couple of months doing this piece of work. And clearly the school's ethos is rooted in empathy, kindness, respect, and inclusivity, which follows the framework David's talked about. And being kind. You know, being kind is it's quite hard sometimes. You've got someone screaming at you in the car park. Being kind and trying to dial it down when you've got very troubled young people in your school. But our watchword is being kind to each other in the tough times. So, like I said, we're in an area of significant deprivation. We've got lots of ALN children in our schools. About half our school is identified as additional learning need or having a need. And we have a reputation now in the area for our trauma-informed work, which means now we're getting a lot of children coming from other schools who aren't coping very well in our area and from England, and they're coming to the school because of our work. That sounds a bit, every child achieving their potential, but if you come to the school, you will feel it. You'll see it in practice every single day. And we put a huge amount of effort into our children being the leaders of our school. So if you come into Penrhos, and you're all more than welcome, you'll see things like this in the school. So it's not just what we're saying or what toolkit we're using or what assessments we're developing in the school or approaches. the school is a place for children. Okay, so we've got things like this in school. You know, they've made that. These little clay tablets, friends are kind. There are, you know, happiness, sharing, tolerance, sympathy. These are everywhere in the school. They're on the walls, they're outside the school as you walk in through the car park. We have things like this in our school. You know, friend, this is the school community. This is outside our school community. It's quite an interesting place to come and visit. So they've created giant posters that went into the community to say that friends should be hopeful. We have dream jars on the wall, so every child has a dream, and they're stuck on the wall and refreshed every year. That's in the foyer, which is good. Our values, our corporate values, these are the children's values. And this is the kind of structure of the presentation on how we developed it. So our leadership, okay. The deputy head teacher of this school, Isabel Scott James, is the lead professional in terms of the role of this, developing the role with staff in school, and she's highly skilled. So she's a trauma-informed practitioner. She's got a team of 7 trauma-informed practitioners. I did a postgraduate certificate in therapeutic counselling because I didn't really understand what all this was about, really. So it's an education piece. And that was a real challenge, really challenging piece of work. I did very well, so I was chuffed to bits, and I got a distinction. But it opened up this avenue of understanding around trauma and how to take people through a process of understanding what they were going through. We put a lot of money into this. You know, we've spent tens of thousands of pounds on training different people in our school to be trauma aware, and that's everybody: dinner ladies, lunchtime supervisors, support staff, senior leaders, our governors. They're all trauma informed in the school, and that opened up a real can of worms because we had a lot of, as I said earlier on, a lot of traumatized adults. So in 2023-24, we initiated the personal growth program across the school, which is not in the framework, and it was a bespoke opportunity for people to engage online through a growth program with supervision and counselling support, and it was extremely successful. So that's something we're really chuffed with that one. And as I said, Isabel is highly skilled in this work. So you probably just pause point there for a minute. How do we identify trauma in the school? So the easy read guide that you alluded to earlier on has a classification that's specialist intervention, trauma intervention, trauma skilled interventions. We've taken that model and we've profiled the whole school. So the whole school now is red, amber, yellow, and green rated for what we consider those identifiers in terms of trauma, because that informs what we need to do with the work that we face, and we do it every year. We use My Concern in school. So if you're not familiar with if there are people in schools on the call, My Concern is a logging system of the narrative of issues around trauma in school. So we might get information from the police telling us that something's happened at the weekend. We'll go into the My Concern system, record the information. But what we do here that isn't done on the line, not that I'm aware of, to this level, we interrogate that system every week. So we create a trauma map. So we create a trauma map of traumatic events in the community over the holidays, for example. That's quite interesting. Or over the weekend. So things are coming in. What are the kind of issues that might be coming into the school and around trauma? We've noted that our trauma-informed practice has reduced well-being referrals amongst the staff, the teaching group, which is just an important thing to think about. And our attendance of our staff has been pretty good to date. Okay. Recently, we appointed a deputy head, and as part of that recruitment process, we asked them quite directly to present on trauma-informed understanding. So what do you understand about trauma? And that was interesting to see what came back from that one. I've mentioned the schools. We've got this trauma-informed lens on all the time. If you come to the school, you will see that we've got a bee meadow, and we're a beekeeping school. So we've got 3 hives of bees in school, and the children and the staff, so I've got 28 teachers and lots of children are trained in beekeeping. So we've got little mini beekeepers. And part of that work is we want to, and I've got a meeting tomorrow, with the Professor Philip Clore, the health board with the boss of health board in Hywel. We're going to see if I can get him to commit to our bee program becoming a social prescribing route through the pharmacies in the area. So if you are experiencing low-level mental health issues or identified as needing support, you can come into the B program at Penrose. So I think that's pretty groundbreaking. Oh, sorry, just a proof point. There we are. There's Sean. That's one of our beekeepers, and there's the children with the bees. If you want to, it's got cuprinol on it. They actually did a piece of work. It's nothing to do with trauma, but they did a scientific experiment where they painted the beehives different colours and monitored the bees' activity around the hives, because certain bees like particular colours, and Cuprinol launched their garden range based on those children's work. So the learner experiences here are really rich and important. Okay, so a few other things we do here. Obviously, trauma-informed works based on trust. You know, we do try and heal and help children recover. The LEAP program is the Learner Experience Access Program. It's unique to the school, and it's based on some of the work that we identified through the TrACE toolkit. We have an Mr. Lee. If you come here, Mr. Lee is an identified trained neurodiverse mentor who works with all groups of children across the school, and he creates teams. So he'll interview the children. He's come from a background of difficulty himself, so he's very, very well versed in trauma practice. You know about relational pace and wine. The other thing we do reasonably well at the moment is SICA is a young person's charity locally, and they are very good at getting lottery funding I can't get my hands on, to develop family bespoke programs around trauma. So one of the things we're doing in the school at the moment, we've got this family construct model. So going back to David's circles, if we've got specialist intervention, we can't create specialist intervention teams in school. So we'll go to SICA and say, can we use the family construct with you to sit down with the family, identify the systemic trauma, and then they will support that family through that. I think at the moment we've probably got about 20, maybe 22 families. So there's someone in school now called Amanda who will sit down with the families and take them through an 8-week program with SICA sitting on her shoulder to make sure that we can respond as a school to the trauma that might come out from those conversations, because there's quite a lot of it here at the moment. And this is the model that you showed. Specialist intervention work level, we call it red, level 1. Amber's the family work with Amanda, and then trauma skilled level is yellow with internal teams. So we're all trained in trauma-informed practice, so it's bread and butter in the school. It's quite straightforward. It's useful though when you map those red, amber, yellow into the school metrics around attendance, unauthorized absence, school performance data. Like I say, we're creating these heat maps now, these kind of thematic maps of where things are changing in the school. For those schools on the call, trauma is very fluid. It's not stop, start, stop, start. It's always in the experience of these children. Okay, so the other thing we do here that's quite, I'm happy to share with you if you come down, we design an awful lot of pupil surveys. So we don't just do the ones you're familiar with like NFER and PASS. We'll design our own bespoke surveys around learner behavior attitudes, and then we'll tag on to that. What do we know about the child's trauma experience? Do they need to go into LEAP? Do they need to go into the family construct? So we're tracking that through at the moment. And that's great. We keep learning because we're sharing our practice across the across Wales and across the region. And I want to share with you the future. So the future. So what we're doing at the moment is, and this happened today, so it's all about real time and sharing good practice. There was a community event across from our school where local businesses were getting together to try and sort of reinvigorate the use of this very large space community centre across the road. So I took the children across in view of the fact that we're going to be talking today to the school council across with an iPad with a design survey, was asking the people from the business community, you know, what was their understanding of trauma? What did they know about it? And the children were gathering the information through iPad feedback. When that information comes back into the school today, we'll start using AI. We're all familiar with AI, and we'll start designing a method on how we can, as a school, take our work into the community, because the big piece of work we've got to do. Now, the school can't do this because our primary role is to teach and support learning within the school. But we think with the backing of this group, we could get trauma-informed practice into the community with the school as the kind of launch pad for that piece of work. So that's what we want to do, David, is take the trauma-informed practice of the school and approaches into where we work. So that's kind of where we are really as a school. It's been a bit of a journey. I'm happy to share with anyone who wants to come down. You can just jump on the train and come down. We'll look after you, because you have to feel it and you have to see it. So I don't know if we have any Q&A or questions. If that's long enough, I think so. Okay.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Joe. Yeah, that's brilliant. It's really good to see the sort of, quite groundbreaking stuff that you're doing there. And especially that way forward. I love the idea of the use of AI and into the communities as well, because I think a lot of feedback we get from schools, it's a lot of, especially with the parents and sort of family members and the sort of the trauma that might be there as well, and how we can address and support them in that same way. So thank you so much. I was wondering, Joe, I know we said to put comments in there, but as we've got a little bit of time, I was wondering if anyone had any sort of, if you're okay with that, Joe, any sort
it's fine,
questions. Nicola?
Nicole,
sorry.
Hello.
I'm just curious, one of the barriers to getting all the staff and getting schools trauma informed, often what we get told is, budgets, is time for training staff. That seems to be a big barrier. How did you get over that?
Well, I could say I just insisted we had to do the work. So the main thing is, at the point we decided to get involved with the work, the schools it's a really tough area. People really sort of get frazzled around the edges around some of the work. So I said, we sat down as a group and said, okay, we've got to get a grip on this. If we become trauma-informed training, we'll understand why our children are behaving in a particular way and they're bringing their trauma into school, and then you can change their lives by changing your approach to that. So it was a bit of a buy-in, but my SLT and Isabel, who's in another meeting at the moment, we just kept pushing it. That's why I did the postgrad in trauma-informed counselling, because I didn't really understand what it meant, to be honest. So when I found out, then I had a much better understanding of, yes, this has to be overcome, and just kept pushing at it. And made the resource. We keep spending money on the same things, or we can spend money on something that's different.
Yeah.
Make our jobs better and make the school better, and it is a better place for it.
Great, thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, brilliant. Oh, again, thank you, Joe, again for that. And I think that something that sort of really resonates with us is that, in any school that's or any organisation that's trauma informed, you should be able to feel it as you walk through. You should be able to see it. You should be able to walk around and speak to staff and get that from that. And I know that Ysgol Penrose is really sort of, like you said, as soon as you walk into the door, you should feel that sort of trauma informed, that sort of the empathy and the sort of kindness, like you said, should be coming from everywhere, isn't it? And I think it's really important that that's embedded throughout.
One of the things I'd just like to raise with the group, schools are inspected under Estin. Okay. So in the Estin framework, you've got people's attitudes to learning, and in there, it talks about them being able to collaborate, to be resilient. They actually comment on these things. So we've built survey designs called "Myself as a Learner" and "Walk in My Shoes." That's an interesting one. "Walk in My Shoes" is a survey where you will walk in the shoes of the child as a learner in the school, and you capture all that, and then the question about is it effective practice and does it work? It's there, isn't it? You've got the voice of the learner in there, and they're sophisticated measures of it. And I'm happy to share with anyone if you want them. You can have them and give them a go. Okay.
Oh, brilliant! Thank you, Joe. Yeah, I'm sure people will be biting your hands off for a school visit or more information on that. So yeah, I really appreciate that. Thank you very much, and thank you for your time for joining with us today.
Yeah. Would you excuse me now? I've got to get to an appointment. So
yes,
Maria, I'm sorry I can't hear you. Listen to yours, because I know it's going to be great as well. All right.
Thanks, Joe. Thank you very much.
All right. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening. God bless. Bye.
Okay. So thanks, Joe, for that. Maria, I wonder if you should share the wonderful stuff you've been doing at Whitmore.
Okay. Can you see that okay?
Yes.
Okay. Right. My worst nightmare is following Joe on anything. But anyway, here we are. So I'm going to tell you about the things that we do to be a trauma-informed school in a secondary school. So just to give you a bit of context, the school that I work in is Whitmore High School, which is in the centre of Barry, and we have over 1,000 pupils, high level of free school meals, and a significant amount of children with local authority IDPs and school-based IDPs, because we host the largest autism base in the Vale of Glamorgan. So in my role is leading on inclusion, well-being throughout the school, and this is very much what I am passionate about as a head of school. So most importantly, to begin with, that means that as head of school, I get to have a voice, obviously, in SLT meetings, in governors' meetings, and it's really important that that agenda is within your SLT, is within the governors, and making sure that everybody is quite clear that that is an agenda that's front and centre of everything that we are doing. So as a high school, so I'm just gonna do that. Okay, right. I wondered about putting this slide up, but I decided to be unapologetic and unashamed, because this is basically our whole school ethos. And one thing I'd say about Whitmore High School is we really like to make things simple, so that, because when you're in a large organisation, everybody needs to absolutely understand what we're about. And so amongst our school staff and amongst the relationships that we have with our pupils, this is really what we are trying to bring every single day. And most importantly for me is to stress, this has to come from your senior leaders, your executive head, your head of school, your senior leadership team, your teachers, TAs, all of the staff in the school need to be singing from the same hymn sheet. And I know that we will all think about some of the greatest teachers in our schools and look at them and the way that they engage with pupils. And what they are doing in that moment is exactly this. They are showing that person that they are really engaging with them and they are in that moment with them. And I think it's one of the strongest things that I drew out of doing the trauma-informed diploma. So what I would say is, as a school, we don't send whole school emails. I mean, we do a few, but we tend to go and actually speak to our staff. We know our staff, we know them really, really well. And then that kind of feeling then kind of goes down to the children. Those kind of relationships are absolutely everything for us. So we are trying to create an environment in our school where everybody feels a sense of belonging, they feel enriched, and that they are really happy. So how do we do this? So in a large organisation, obviously, it's really important that we have kind of structures and processes set up. So one of the most important things that we do is our teaching and learning model. So teaching and learning in our school has a certain structure, and it means that everybody kind of goes into a lesson knowing exactly what that structure is. So if you are a pupil, a hypervigilant pupil, a pupil who is feeling a little bit anxious, you know before you get in what the seating plan is, where I'm going to be sitting, what the structure of the lesson is, and it takes away some barriers. The other thing is that we have worked really long and hard on our curriculum and made sure that all of our children feel represented in that curriculum. We've reviewed that really carefully to make sure that children with protected characteristics feel really represented. The other thing that I think is crucial to making sure that we are meeting the needs of all our learners is that we write something called class rationales. A class rationale is a document which we expect people to start creating in this term. And what they need to do to write a class rationale is they need to have read the pupil passport, they need to have read the IDP, and they need to have really understood the children in front of them. And in the class rationale, which is a hefty document, they have to be saying why they are teaching in a specific way, based on all the findings of those children. And that's a really impactful way of meeting a real diverse range of needs. So the other thing that we are really passionate about is professional learning, and we say to all of our staff, you know, please ask if you want to go and do something, do it, and we will try and fund it. And all staff know that when they're in set day, there are training. The training is really focused and they've been thought about. So in a way, not only are we upskilling them, so they're kind of understanding more aspects of education, but they also feel empowered themselves. And things like this is really part of a whole school approach for me in terms of well-being and trauma informed. It all means that the culture within the school is one where everybody feels that they are really developing. And we are also really upskilling them in key areas. So, for example, with our trauma informed has been done as whole school, and then it has been done in smaller groups. We've worked on big empathetic drawing, sand tray therapy, and all of these things are being kind of rolled out. But also there is a consistency of approach from senior leaders within the school in terms of how we model behaviour constantly. And it is this which means, I mean, we recently won an award for best place to work for enrichment and education, because of all of the efforts that we do. So everybody's feeling valued. So it's not just a case of, oh, we're doing trauma informed with the children. We're kind of making sure the whole environment is set up for the best possible outcomes for everybody. So once you've embedded that culture and your teaching and learning model means that you've thought about all those children and they are their needs are being met, you realise that that's fine for a certain percentage of your pupils, but there are also other things that you need to be doing. So that we have kind of created a range of provisions for our students. As I mentioned before, we have a really large autism base. So there's a few pictures of our autism-based pupils, and that's a kind of growing base. But within that, you know, the children, we've identified the fact that autistic children would say that the bit of their curriculum is missing is kind of being independent. And how are they going to live in life? They might have 9 A stars, but they can't go and buy something at the shop. So we've kind of added that curriculum to their education. We've also realised that there's a growing trend of people who are more anxious in terms of coming into school. So we've created the Whitmore Hub, which is kind of key stage 4 provision for those children who may be neurodiverse, may just be suffering with anxiety. And it's a really flexible, bespoke curriculum for those pupils. We also, with our pastoral team, as soon as our pupils arrive, we do early identification of need, and then we are able to, straight away when they start with us in September, all year groups there's a survey, we do the PASS survey, and from that PASS survey we are able to identify individual students who really need an extra level of support. We have a huge range of outside agencies that come in, but we also do a lot of work ourselves around this, and also using our sixth formers as mentors. We have a play team coming in, so there's all sorts of things that is really focused on those children who have suffered trauma. In addition to that, we run a school bakery, so that's often very much for the children who have suffered trauma and who are really struggling in the school, and they can have a real life kind of working experience and really build up their self-esteem in the bakery, selling products to staff members and other pupils in the school. And then our biggest development, I suppose, is again a recognition in Key Stage 3 that there are lots of children who are really struggling to re-engage with school. So we have developed a bit at the back of the garden area. As you can see, there's several huts, which you'll be glad to know because it's Barry, they are heated and have running water. And we have incredibly skilled staff working out there on trying to get children back to school. This work has been recognised by the local authority, and we now they now buy places. Our job being to try and reintegrate those children back into their own school with the hard work of our staff. Right. And of course, one of the most important things that we do in our school is that we have dogs, and we actually have a few different animals, but these are our key animals, Daisy and Pilot. And the power of animals and dogs in your school is enormous if ever you've gone down that route. Conversations children will have about things when a pet is there or a dog are completely different to ones without. You know, if I'm on duty and I'm going around school and there's a child who's really distressed outside a classroom and I have Daisy with me, the conversation is completely different because they've stroked the dog first and then the chat starts. So, you know, things like that. You know, some people think, well, maybe it's a gimmick having a dog, but actually the power of it is enormous. So yeah, we also run a huge amount of clubs. So I guess what I'm trying to say at Whitmore is teaching and learning, ethos, provisions, clubs, which basically are for all of our pupils. You've got our sports clubs, and all the usual clubs you'd expect. But then obviously we've got such a diverse population. So we've got Sewing Bee, we've got Lego, we've got Dungeons and Dragons, we've got Battle Club, which is actually kids learning to do reenactment fighting. It's a lot of fun. I've had a go. But all these things, it's kind of, for me, as a high school in such a large organisation, you're trying to make sure that you've met all of the needs of all of your pupils, and there's kind of something for everyone. And I suppose the evidence for us that all of this is working is our past survey results. So anything in green means that it's really positive and successful and above national average. So this has been our picture for some years now with consistent greens, and this is also backed up in our Shern survey results, which actually show that the longer our pupils stay with us, the more of a sense of belonging they get. So you'd usually expect kind of by year 11 in your Shern survey data, probably pupils kind of tailing off in terms of how they feel about their role in the school, but actually ours just grows with the year group. And I think that's something that we are really proud of. I've probably forgotten a million things to say, but that's it.
Oh, that's amazing. Thanks, Maria. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit now, if that's okay. Just ask if there's any questions or anyone who would like to ask Maria anything about Whitmore High School's journey. No? I was just going to ask Maria if you, oh, hang on, Nicole?
Sorry, me again. I'm just really curious. We've worked with a number of schools, and I've worked with schools in various roles over the years. And whenever the idea of animal support comes up, whether it's a rabbit in the classroom or particularly dogs, everybody says, "Oh no, insurance won't allow it." So I guess my question again is, how did you get over that barrier or potential barrier of having animals in the school? And some students may be allergic and all of those kinds of things that people usually immediately say, oh, we can't possibly do that because.
Well, first of all, I think in the local authority that I work in, there is a kind of policy about this. The second thing is you obviously do have to send out some intel to parents. The governors have to agree it. before it happens, because also you're safeguarding the animal as well, because my dog comes in, but you know, she's not in every day, and I'd say she did light duties, but also she is a trained pets therapy dog. So she's not coming in as a pets therapy dog, because they wouldn't, you know, they wouldn't want to back that, you know, that's a very different role. But it means that she has had a certain level of training and kind of shown that she kind of can pass a certain level of tests. So there are things that you can do, and I think in the Vale there are quite a few dogs in schools, but I understand that there are some kind of issues, but around children being allergic. But once you've informed parents, and you know, you kind of know which those pupils are, you're not going to force the dog on anybody. Yeah.
I think it's wonderful. I've seen firsthand the incredible healing impact of somebody who's really upset or anxious, or you know, holding it together, you know, meeting with just a dog, you know, and just like you said, just petting the dog and having that connection is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Just changes the whole moment.
It really does. Thanks.
Thanks, Nicole. Another question's popped up, Maria, in the chat from Lucy, saying, "I'd love to hear more about parent engagement, and if there is any resistance, and if so, how you overcome it." I'm assuming that means about the wider sort of trauma-informed approach.
So what I would say about our school is, and I think it is quite unique in this respect, is that we value parental engagement above many other things, because of course that's part of relationships and our engagement. So and I know, because you know, I know other children in other secondary schools where this wouldn't happen, but what we do in the first term is every single child would have a phone call home from their form tutor to check in on them, not necessarily if there's an issue, but we are just building those initial relationships, and we give our staff time to do that. So our staff are seeing then that we are valuing that, and so I would say that the relationships between form tutors, heads of year, and the parents in their year group is one of the strongest things that that we have here at Whitmore. And so it means that when you come to those really difficult conversations, or something goes wrong, the parents saying, well, they've already got the trust in the person that they're speaking to, so it makes it less difficult. And we meet with parents constantly. We are constantly in and out of meetings, and parents know that they can come in and speak to us, and we will always try and make ourselves available, which I think is very different in some high schools. I think that is a different tone.
I think that's a really interesting point, because I know in sort of primary schools, obviously you're sometimes easier to engage with the parents because you might see them at the school gate, or you know that you know that they pick them up. You know, it's easier to come in. But obviously in secondary schools, it's so much bigger. Children, you know, either get bussed in or they walk in and out, so you don't see those parents, and building up those relationships is huge, isn't it? And I think, you know, obviously this is something that Whitmore does incredibly well to build those relationships. Okay, thank you, Maria. Again, absolutely fantastic insights there into all the sort of wonderful work that you've been doing. Just to say that this, like I said, the case study that we've got that's on our website and on in our suite of resources as well on Hub. This is about Whitmore and Penrose, so a lot of the stuff that Maria has talked about today is included in that, and sort of in a lot more detail as well, the other things as well. But thank you very much, Maria. That's absolutely fantastic, and I think it's again, it would be, you know, wonderful to hear to see more about this. And I know that it's like I said, it's a real beacon of good practice, and it shows as well with those outcomes that Maria was saying, the sort of impact that the trauma-informed approach can have around that as well, and how schools have adopted, you know, different levels of training, or different sort of training from different areas, and the real impact that it can make. So thank you very much, Maria. Thank you for that. Next, so Tegan, is going to share. So Tegan Bailey-Solis from Lecture of Criminology and Trauma-Informed Approaches at Wrexham University is going to tell us about some of the resources. Tegan, are you here?
I am. Hello, everybody. I will share my presentation now. I'll make sure I share the correct one because I also have one up on youth justice, unless you all want a lecture in that. So hopefully, apologies. Hopefully you'll be able to see my screen now.
Yeah, we can see that.
Excellent. So yeah, my name is Dr. Tegan Bridey-Solis, and as David said, I'm a lecturer in policing, criminology and trauma-informed approaches at Wrexham University. And at the university, we're also on a journey to becoming trauma-informed, and have been on the journey since 2019, but that's not going to be the premise of the talk today. I'm really excited actually to be with you all and to share some of the research that we've been doing. Now you'll see lots of people's names on the screen there: Lisa Formby, Dr. Karen Rees-Jones, Paula Wood, Deborah Robert, Catherine Simon and Karen Tilby. And they are, alongside me, the research team that have been working on this piece of research that I'm going to share with you today. And it's really important just to mention them all because I'm not sure if any of them are in the call right now, but they've just been a fantastic team to work with across the university, not all from research backgrounds as well. So it's just been a pleasure to kind of work alongside them on this piece. So what I want to talk about today is our Navigating the Storm workbook research. And what I'm going to do is share the animation. So I do apologise if you've seen it, but it's a short animation relating to the topic of trauma and trauma-informed approaches, and then share our recent research, which has been based on the animation. The research that we've done involves 6 primary schools. However, we are looking at ways of extending that and looking at different age groups that we can work with as well. So hopefully you'll be able to hear this. We are all navigating life, just like boats navigate water. When our life feels calm and manageable, the water gently laps the side of our boat. When life feels tough, the water is a stormy ocean with terrifying waves crashing all around. Some of us will be scared to face this storm, but manage to brace ourselves to do so, while others will feel anxious and may struggle to cope, fearing that one big wave could destroy them. As the storm passes, we focus on our recovery, but this is not always so simple. The experience of such an event may leave some to question their safety, anticipating another storm which will carry them out to sea again. The boat that we use to navigate the waters in life adjusts as we grow and our circumstances change. We might start life as a luxurious cruise liner, while others would compare themselves to a small sailboat or even a simple plank of wood. Each vessel is unique, based on experiences, relationships, and self-identity. To the outside world, a boat can look worn. The boat may have a few leaks or a broken sail, but we may feel happy, content, and safe on board. Another boat may look safe and sturdy, but there are various issues on board or below deck that can't be seen. The water can also be a treacherous place, and some of us may have found ourselves in predatory waters for some time. Even moving to safer, gentler waters, mistrust can prevail, and some of us remain on guard. Our adverse reactions are often rooted in our previous experiences and remain difficult to ignore. After a challenging period, it is helpful to seek safety with a chance to be guided and supported by others and to rest and repair any damage. Without help to dock, we may be deprived of an opportunity to take time to revive our confidence and feel forced to remain in choppy waters, struggling to feel safe and lost without help. Distress flares equip our boats to save us, but they are only useful if we are able to recognise danger, know when to ask for help, and know how to use them. They can also be misused, with constant threats perceived in every situation and in a constant state of high alert. It is important to use our anchor of resilience, which gives us control when things get tough, helps us to stay on course, and learn from our experiences. It is not our fault if we struggle to use our anchors. We have little control over its weight. Our vessels are also equipped with a trauma-informed telescope. This allows us to look through a lens at an individual, their boat, and the water
for surrounding them and begin to understand their own specific situation. Through this, we can connect and respond with kindness in a safe and trustworthy way. A collaborative, trauma-informed approach can teach us to recognise that each separate journey is unique. It is important to understand, however, that regardless of experience in adversity, we all have strengths and can go on to successfully navigate the storms that may come our way.
So the animation was created and launched in 2022, and it is used across the UK in different training packages, and also in America and Canada in high security prisons and across law firms as well. And it's just a gentle introduction into trauma and trauma-informed approaches. And probably a couple of months after the launch of the animation, Karen Tilby, who's part of our research team and is also a trauma-informed yoga practitioner, came to me and said that it would make a really nice workbook for schools to use, like using the metaphors. And so that's what we did. We created a workbook and used different activities within the workbook that kind of matched the metaphors within the animation. So why do we think that the workbook is needed? Well, emotional, psychological and social well-being during childhood influences educational attainment, and we're all aware of that, but also mental health, social prospects and general quality of life into adulthood. Therefore, healthy child development is dependent on effective emotion regulation, which refers to intrinsic and extrinsic processes involved in regulating emotional states. And we wanted to focus our workbook on upskilling in the area of emotion regulation. And in order to do that, we needed to have a real idea of co-regulation and self-regulation. So co-regulation is defined as the responsive interactions that provide the modelling, which children need to understand, express and modulate their thoughts, feelings and behaviours. So I liken co-regulation as a two-person kayak, and forgive me for anyone who is a very keen kayaker in here, because I'm probably not going to use the correct terms, but I liken it to a two-person kayak. So if we imagine the caregiver at the front of the kayak and the child at the back of the kayak, if that caregiver is really panicking on the kayak and turning around to the child and saying, oh, we're going to fall in, and kayaking erratically, then how do we think the child is going to respond? And quite often it's through stress and replication. So when it comes time for them to go out on their own in the kayak, they are going to be panicking and again kayaking erratically. Whereas if the caregiver at the front is even in tricky waters, they're calm and they're saying to the child, we've got this, we can do this. It's going to be tricky, yes, but we can manage together, and they're kayaking gently. Then when the child again does come out to kayak on their own, they'll be better equipped to do so. And that's where we gain healthy self-regulation. And self-regulation is the conscious control of thoughts, feelings and behaviours. And in today's society, we have many adults who do struggle with self-regulation. So we know that it's prevalent in children as well. So emotion regulation sits within the broader area of self-regulation, which encompasses emotion and behaviours. And emotion regulation develops significantly over childhood and adolescence, moving from external caregiver-supported strategies to more internal cognitive strategies like reprisal and problem solving. And this maturation is linked to the development of executive functions in the brain, including improved inhibitory control and cognitive flexibility, which allow for more complex and adaptive responses for emotional situations. Caregiving practices, cognitive abilities and social experiences all play a crucial role in shaping an individual's unique trajectory of emotion regulation development. So experiences of trauma and adversity can disrupt emotion regulation, and we're therefore really interested in what can be done in those cases, but also for children who may have really healthy caregiving experiences, but also struggle with emotion and well-being. And so we created the workbook based on metaphors of navigating the storm. So what does this mean for educators? Well, trauma impacts the brain and behaviour, but relationships can heal. So emotion dysregulation isn't defiance, it's a survival response. Students might struggle with impulse control, they might struggle with focus or emotional expression, not because they won't, but because they can't yet. Secure and consistent adult relationships are key to helping students build emotion regulation, which is what we've tried to factor in with the workbook. So focus on connection before correction, and that safety will open the door to learning, because what we know is that a co-regulated brain is a learning brain. So they're better able to learn. And trauma, whilst it might interrupt a child's development, safe, consistent relationships have the power to repair, rewire, and restore. What does our workbook include? Well, it includes activities to help with emotion regulation, such as arts and crafts, and all of the activities are evidence-based. So there's research around arts and crafts in helping to create connection with one another. We have music-based activities which influence emotional processing and regulation. We have activities involving food and drink, because jaw movement is a soothing mechanism, and particularly if it's crunchy foods or like a thick smoothie, that can help with self-regulation and emotion regulation. And finally, activities to learn about behavioural differences and appreciate mindfulness. So you can see an example of one of the activities on screen there. But alongside the workbook, we also produced a practitioner guide and a box of props, which we called Project in a Box, to support learning. An academic paper has also been drafted to explore the theoretical underpinnings of the metaphors and give more insight into the research supporting the chosen activities. So we had, just want to give you an example of what was included in the Project in a Box. So each school that took part in our research received a box full of lots of goodies, which you can see on next to the window there are the boxes lined up, and they had resources in there to create display boards across the school, but they also had resources in there for the children to play with and to create scenes. So they all had a seagull, which I nicknamed Stevie Nicks, but that wasn't a requirement. And they had different objects that they could play with, boats and anchors and things like that, so that they could kind of recreate some of the scenes from the animation, but also use them to complete some of the activities that we suggested. So what did our research do? Well, we initially, before we started anything, apart from create the workbooks in a draft form, we held some workshops with teachers in different schools across Wrexham. And we just held those workshops really to kind of gather initial feedback on the first draft of the document, to kind of find out what they thought was good, what wasn't so good, what could we improve on, how would they like to see the workbook in practice. And then we spent some time as a research team adapting the workbook, to incorporate the feedback from that initial workshop. And then we went into recruitment phase. So we were in touch with various schools in the local area to take part in the pilot project. We actually had 8 schools sign up to take part. 2 schools were unable to complete the project for various reasons, but we had 6 schools go right through to the end of the project. And individuals from the school attended a training session with the research team on how to use the workbook, which was a really lovely session. And then they had a 12-week pilot period, which started just after Christmas, because we all know what happens at Christmas with the Nativity and the visit with Mary and Joseph. So we decided to start our pilot in January and hold it for 3 months. And then after the 3-month period, we held focus groups and interviews with those involved. And there were different individuals involved across schools. So some schools sent a couple of teachers along, or teachers and TAs. With some schools, they had the head teacher come along. So it was quite different, really, depending on what school it was. And then we have our findings. I'm going to share with you some early findings today, but we're going to kind of edit the workbook to suit various developmental stages and look at expanding the research in various settings, but I'll talk to that in just a moment. So some early findings then. The first was around relationships between staff and pupils. So all the teachers that took part agreed that it's really important to know the child before delivering the workbook, because that familiarity and that relationship felt quite important, actually, to encourage engagement, but also having those open and honest conversations. And you can see there we've got a couple of quotes from some of the teachers around relationships. I do think that relationships are absolutely crucial to this. I've got a really good relationship with the children in my class, and we found they engage really well. But also the relationship between pupils and the setting. So what teachers reported hearing was new and open conversations between pupils that were facilitated by the delivery of the workbook, and they felt that they had improved peer friendship. So several teachers spoke about enjoying hearing the children talk together and create new connections. So they've built a little bond, which I really wasn't expecting. It's been really positive. I had a little girl in my group. She just kind of was there and didn't really want to be there. But then she got into it more. You could see it boosting her up. It's been really lovely to see. And she'll now give other pupils a boost, and they'll give it back to her. Alignment with school policy and improvement. So teachers spoke about how the workbook aligned closely with their school's health and wellbeing strategies and supported the development of emotion regulation. All the teachers appreciated that the workbook could be easily picked up and delivered with minimal preparation time, making it a practical resource which offered high outcomes. So just to mention that the workbook is created in a way that's like a pick and mix workbook, so you don't have to work from front to back. You can kind of pick out a particular activity that might be suitable for that child or that group of children. Each activity has options for a one-to-one setting or a class setting, and there are more than one activity option to try to suit different kind of needs or wants for that particular child or that class. So in relation to evidence-informed practice, the supporting literature-based document that was provided was reported as valuable and added rigour and trustworthiness to the evidence behind the workbook. So again, another quote there from a teacher. As a teacher, you want to know it's been based on something, you want to know that it's come from research, but we don't want to spend all our time reading through those articles because I think it can be really overwhelming. The workbook overall was seen as positive resource for schools due to its simplicity, time-saving activities, potential impact, and it not being resource or financially dependent for delivery. So also to say with the workbook, we tried to look at activities that would require minimal resources, and we tried to also include as much of the needed resource as appendices at the end of the workbook as well. But of course, some schools would, can adapt and will adapt those appendices to be more suitable for their settings. This is something that's really quick and simple. It's not going to take loads of resources or money or training to deliver. It's practical, it's direct, and you see the impact straight away, and that's all you want. So in terms of the resources, the video was really popular. Excuse me, sorry. It was really popular and was reported as being well received by the majority of pupils. It was recommended that the video shown at the beginning of delivery and was seen as a positive resource and tool. Some of the children wanted to watch it quite a few times as well. So here we have another quote. When I looked at it more and I showed the video to the whole class to see their responses and reaction to it, I felt it was a tool that I could use with all children. So I didn't just use it with children with trauma, I used it with all children to support children's well-being. And that is the thing with the workbook. It's designed to be able to be used with any child, whether they have experienced adversity or not. The metaphor, so the overall metaphor and meaning behind the programme and workbook was reported as well received. Teachers would use wordings related to the term throughout the school week, such as going through a stormy patch to help integrate it. And what they found was that many pupils were starting to use the metaphor to explain how they were feeling. showing that they'd grasped the context quickly. So here we have another quote. He was like, well, today my water's been really choppy because I had a really rubbish day. So they were using the metaphor to kind of help to explain how they were feeling if it felt quite difficult to kind of say that out loud. And then the final section for our early findings, again, relates to the metaphor. So he talked and it was really powerful. At the end of the session, he was like, oh, I've just spoke about that. And we felt it was so powerful. He felt liberated by having no one judge him. So this is referring to a child who was using, again, the metaphor to kind of talk about how he was feeling. For some children, neurodivergent children, the metaphor was a barrier, and teachers reported talking through the metaphor during craft sessions to help with understanding, whilst others felt it just didn't really translate. So 2 children had a diagnosis of autism and 1 ADHD, and they struggled with the metaphor because they were thinking of it literally. So they were thinking, well, I'm not a boat, so why would I describe myself as a boat? And then finally, the workbook. So overall, the workbook was described as easy to deliver, with tasks being high quality and multisensory. One teacher described it as an informal and relaxed way to deliver the topic, whilst others appreciated how it offered something different and was visually pleasing. The workbook activities and resources were used in various ways with adaptations. So here's just a few pictures of some of the children using the workbooks and doing some of the activities. So we've got a display board in the corner. So they were creating boards that represent them as well. Does it feel safe? What's happening? If there was a storm, what would be needed? We have an anchor of resilience at the bottom. So on the anchor, children will write problems or issues that might make the anchor difficult to lift, or might make resilience feel low. And then they make paper chains to attach to the anchor with strengths to help lift it, strengths that they have. We've got a class doing yoga there, so yoga based on different bodies of water. So as I said, Karen Tilby's a trauma-informed yoga practitioner, so she's created yoga to go with the metaphor. And there's seated option for yoga as well. And then we've also got the river activity, so to write and draw on the outside of the river who could help at various stages of our life and how do they make us feel. And as I say, the activities can be different. So you can see a child holding up a boat in the upper right-hand corner. That's a boat that they've made, but you can see in the middle of the top row, children have physically made a boat outside that they can stand in as well. So it just depends on what the child would like to do and what's available at the school. So what will we do now? Well, we're going to continue to write up our findings. We're currently writing up a report as a research team. And then we're going to address some of the changes to the workbook. So look at the metaphor so that it can be a little bit more appropriate for neurodivergent children. We're also looking at alternative themes, and we already have some people helping us with that in terms of the design. So we can look at themes that aren't nautical, because we do appreciate and understand that nautical themes can also be traumatizing for people. So we're looking at different themes of the workbook. And we're going to hopefully continue research in this area and pilot workbooks in other settings with children of different ages, some secondary schools potentially, children in the justice system, but also we're looking at piloting it with adults as well. So we're looking at the moment for different kind of research funding pots to be able to continue this work and hopefully release the resource at some point as well. So thank you so much for listening. I'll stop sharing now.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you, Tegan. I was just wondering to sort of open up if anyone had any questions for Tegan about the resources. No? Okay. Yeah, I mean, I've seen the resources and heard and seen you present them before, and I think they're fantastic. And it's really interesting to have that sort of evidence-based, sort of like research-based around resources as well, to know that they work and know that everything put into it is evidence-based, and it's really exciting with how that. So obviously at the moment it's still in the sort of the pilot sort of phase of things. I mean, and you said about what sort of next in that. When might people be able to see these resources, or might be able to use them in their settings, or what's?
It's tricky to say really, because we're keen to to make sure that it's quality before it goes out
Yeah.
to people, and it's really really good quality before we kind of release to the public. So it's difficult to say. I probably would like to do a little bit more research into the pilot area, but we were really kind of when we were looking at different interventions, it's really difficult to find anything, isn't it, to kind of get this work going and support people, because I think a lot, and rightly so, a lot of focus has been on initially trauma and what trauma can do and trauma responses, but there's less out there on actual interventions for healing, which I think is really important that we start looking at those sorts of things around, you know, what can be done about it, what can be done to support children and adults, in fact. And this is just a tiny little dot really in comparison to what there could be and what's out there probably worldwide as well. So it's really exciting to be in this space and to see how we can all develop in this space together as well.
Yeah, it's fantastic research, and we're all sort of look forward to hearing more about it, and hoping the pilot, you know, continues to do as well as it does, because I think that you know, based on the video itself as well, I think the video is fantastic, as a lot of people are sort of agreeing with me. And again, it works well across the sort of age range, doesn't it? It's really accessible with the sort of the metaphor as well with it. So thank you, Tegan. Thanks very much for sharing with us today. So next we have Bryony Parry from the violence protection team, prevention team. Sorry, Bryony, are you out there?
I'm here, Dave.
Excellent.
It's hard when there's so many people on the call, isn't it? Because you can't see everyone, and you're just kind
It
of
is a little
hoping that
bit,
they're
yeah,
there.
it is when everyone sort of pops in. But right, Brian, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen and hope that you can see it.
Yeah, we can see that.
Ah, fab. I now can't see you. So if anyone has any questions or comments, either just shout out or pop it in the chat, because I can only, I can't see anybody now, unfortunately. But yeah, thank you, Dave. My name's Bryony. I work in the violence prevention team, which is part of Public Health Wales. And I'm here to talk to you today about the Wales About Violence framework. I found this afternoon really interesting, like all of the presenters so far. I've just been really interested in the ways in which a trauma-informed approach is kind of being integrated within schools, and like all of the different resources and the different approaches that different settings are taking. And what I'm hoping is that by sharing with you about the framework, it will help you to both consider kind of how violence prevention activity can be delivered as part of a trauma-informed approach, but also how the framework itself can support the delivery of a trauma-informed approach to violence prevention. I'm first going to talk a little bit about the framework, because I'm aware that maybe not everybody will have heard about it. I'll then share some of kind of the data and the statistics that we have that give some insight into what types of violence and what violence looks like within school settings. And then finally, I will talk a little bit about, I've gone over, gone on to the next slide. I will talk a little bit about how the framework can support violence prevention, specifically in schools, and including kind of in supporting a trauma-informed approach. So for those who haven't seen it, the Wales About Violence framework, we published it a couple of years ago, and it's a framework for preventing violence among children and young people. We co-produced it with a team of young people called the Peer Action Collective Cymru, and we also kind of sought the perspectives of over 1,000 children, young people and professionals from across Wales during its development. You can see there on the right hand side like the different ways in which we try to engage with different people through both online and in-person events, workshops, things like that. The framework is an evidence-informed guide to violence prevention, and it's intended to be used by professionals to develop primary prevention and early intervention strategies, taking a public health and whole system approach to violence prevention. So within that, the kind of core of the framework, and I will go into a bit more detail in a moment, there's 9 strategies that are included in the framework, and these are underpinned by 9 violence prevention principles, which have kind of been identified by children, young people and professionals as really key to delivering any violence prevention activity. I will share a link to the framework and the website in the chat once I've stopped talking. So if you haven't read it or you're interested in learning more about it, then you'll be able to find it on the website. So yeah, first of all, kind of, as I mentioned, the framework is specifically looking at violence among children and young people. And the reason why we chose to focus on this is kind of, well, there's three main reasons. I think, first of all, children and young people are most at risk of experiencing violence compared to any other age group. They're also most likely to experience multiple forms of violence. So, for example, if a child in early life experiences physical violence or neglect, they are at a greater risk of experiencing other forms of violence later in adolescence and early adulthood. But perhaps more positively, the evidence suggests that prevention approaches are most effective when implemented with children and young people. And that's because kind of at this stage of life, as people are developing maybe their sense of self, they're creating kind of their norms and their values, that's a really important time to kind of look at the different interventions that can work to prevent violence. And whilst I'm talking about children and young people across this presentation, it's just important to note that the framework is looking at anyone under the age of 25. And in terms of violence, we're not looking at a specific form of violence, like some strategies or approaches may kind of look specifically, for example, at violence against women or knife crime, things like that. This framework really looks to prevent all types of violence and across all settings. So I mentioned earlier about the 9 principles for violence prevention, and these are really just they outline kind of how violence prevention activity should be delivered and what needs to be considered for successful violence prevention activity. There are things like ensuring to be working in partnership across organisations and sectors, using data and evidence to inform decision making, co-producing violence prevention activity with the intended audience and involving communities in the development of any activity. And also, very importantly, I think, especially for this session, around taking a trauma-informed approach. And within a violence prevention context and within the framework, we kind of see this as recognising that any violence prevention activity should kind of recognise and support the strengths of an individual and make sure that any activity is also person-centred and empowering. And then those principles are kind of key to delivering the 9 violence prevention strategies. And these strategies outline the types of activity that can be delivered at an individual, community and societal level to prevent violence. They very much look at primary prevention and early intervention. So that's kind of preventing violence before it occurs, or intervening early to kind of prevent the violence from escalating, to prevent it from stop it from happening again, and also to minimise harm to the people that have experienced it. And because of that kind of primary prevention, early intervention focus, a lot of these strategies really look at kind of those underlying causes of violence. And they include things like supporting families and parenting, creating safe community environments, and looking at how we can shift kind of social norms and values that may perpetuate violence. All of these strategies call everyone to action. It is very much kind of a whole system framework. So none of these strategies kind of are described as like the responsibility of one organisation or sector. And each strategy within the framework then has a description of kind of why the strategy is important, what it could look like, and then examples of different interventions that already exist in Wales that kind of correspond to the strategies. So you can see kind of what it looks like in real life, I guess. You'll see right in the centre of the community line, there is a strategy focused on schools and education, and I will go into a bit more detail about that towards the end of my presentation. But I think it's just important to note here how within the framework it does highlight how not everything has to be done within within a school. Like that isn't it's not that violence prevention activity had to take place kind of right across the community, but that schools and education more generally is a really important aspect of violence prevention. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the role that schools can play in violence prevention, and I think this is probably kind of common knowledge by many people on this call, but I think that education plays a crucial role in violence prevention, and mainly for two reasons. So firstly, schools are a place where children and young people are socialised and they can learn about healthy relationships. There's access to trusted adults, and they can grow that sense of belonging and acquire confidence and different experiences that can support them later in life. And then also educational engagement and attainment in itself is an important protective factor when it comes to violence prevention. So there's kind of those two different things at play that schools are really in a unique and quite strong position to be able to support young people. And then further to that, obviously staff in schools are kind of in a unique position to notice if something is wrong, and they're also in a position where they may be able to support a young person through a trauma-informed approach. And I think we've seen some great examples of that from people on the call today about how schools are a place for learning, but they're also a place for developing those relationships and making sure that young people can feel that kind of safety in order to be able to learn. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about what we do know about violence in education settings. We do have some data to indicate that violence in school settings is possibly increasing. I'm being very lots of caveats to this data, but as the violence prevention team, we do collate and share multi-agency data from police and health boards and the ambulance service. And all of this data that you can see on the screen here is available on our Wales Violence Prevention portal. So I can also include a link to there. Anybody with any professionals can access this data. It's all anonymised and it doesn't kind of go into the details of any kind of specific location or specific school or anything like that, but you are able to filter the data to show where school was mentioned as a setting for violence. So it can be quite useful, but it kind of only shows part of the picture, I think, as we're all aware. Like, this is data that has been, the data shown on the screen here is only where somebody has attended hospital as a result of violence experienced in school, and that's only going to be kind of quite a minority of people. But you can see here that assaults in schools requiring medical treatment at an emergency department have increased by 84% between 2021 and 2024. There are 18% of all emergency department assault attendances by children or a young person were the reported location of the assault was at a school, and 70% of under 18-year-olds reported a school assault, and 70% of those were male. So you can see that from this data, there is a potential that violence in schools is increasing. And then we also have some statistics here that are included in the framework, and this just kind of highlights how violence may be experienced unequally in education settings. So we see in the statistics, and also when we spoke to young people in the development of the framework, that bullying was a real concern of young people. And in 2018, 1 in 2 students in Wales said that they had experienced bullying. And 6 in 10 female secondary school pupils reported having personal experience of peer-on-peer harassment. And it's also, I think, important to note that for children living in the poorest areas of the UK, they're 7 times more likely to be involved in violent crimes as a young adult. So we can see here that a person's identity is likely going to impact their experience of violence, and that actually the education system can be a really important protective factor in making sure that those risks are minimized. And then finally, just kind of on looking at the data and statistics around violence, I think it's just important to note, and I did mention this at the beginning, I think, about how violence is interconnected, and they shouldn't be treated like different types of violence shouldn't be treated separately necessarily. It's something we've tried to avoid in the framework. Certainly when we were speaking to young people through its development, they kind of didn't work in the same silos that we as professionals often do. And so we just kind of want to make the point with the framework, I guess, that actually interventions can be developed to kind of intervene in various types of violence. And the same kind of things can work to prevent all forms of violence. So research tells us that different forms of discrimination and violence are interlinked. So, for example, bullying can be a precursor to sexual harassment, or homophobic comments could lead to physical violence. And children and young people who engage in one form of violence, such as bullying, are also likely to engage in other forms of violence. So when we're thinking about violence prevention interventions within a school setting, it's important to kind of think about how the interventions that are put in place can seek to address the underlying causes, attitudes, behaviours that lead to violence taking place, rather than perhaps specifically looking at a certain type of violence that has become apparent in the school setting. And this is kind of an extract from the framework looking at that schools and education strategy that I mentioned earlier. You can see here that we include kind of evidence of what works for schools and education. And that's things like using a whole school approach, delivering healthy relationship programs, having access to trusted adults and role models. And there's a lot of opportunity in Wales for this type of work to take place, such as through the Curriculum for Wales, the whole school approach to emotional and mental well-being, and kind of the work that we've been speaking about today around developing a trauma-informed education system. And then the framework also includes some examples of different programs or intervention types that kind of sit under the strategy. And that's things like developing leadership and policies and governance, which I think both Joe and Maria spoke about kind of within their presentations, and also something that Maria was speaking about that I found really interesting was that kind of involvement of parents and carers in violence prevention activity and developing those really strong relationships with kind of the adults in young people's lives that exist outside of the school setting, to ensure that any violence prevention activity kind of can be understood by the people in the young person's life, providing trauma-informed training to education staff, and providing training on other things for staff too, such as on healthy relationships, social norms and values, online safety, and just kind of equipping the staff in the school as best as possible, I guess, to be able to respond to young people's needs when it comes to violence prevention. And there's also other things that have been mentioned today, kind of around like mapping, collecting data, identifying, developing safe spaces where young people can be free to kind of speak about problems and what's happening to them. And within that, then developing kind of partnerships with local support services that may have a more targeted or a more specific kind of remit that can help in times of trouble. So I think I've only got a couple of minutes left, so I'll just very briefly talk about kind of what we're doing as the violence prevention team to kind of support the integration of violence prevention going forward. So we are developing a violence prevention deep dive to support the delivery of the new national standards for health and well-being. It's my colleague, it's today's her non-working day, so unfortunately she couldn't be here, but my colleague Lara is kind of mainly involved in that work. So if anyone is interested, then please feel free. I'll put my email address in the chat. Please feel free to email me and I can kind of share anything with Lara, my colleague, to give a bit more information on that. And we also, you'll see on the website and through our newsletter, we have space to kind of share examples of good practice. We really want to make sure that wherever possible, where people are developing really strong violence prevention activity, that can be shared with partners across Wales, so that people can kind of learn what works and learn how to develop and deliver violence prevention activity across a range of different settings. And then finally, I just wanted to end on this slide. So this is some of the quotes that we had from children about, we asked them the question, what would your life be like if violence didn't exist? And these are kind of some of the things that we heard from them. So things about having less anxiety, that they would be happier, that they'd be able to sleep better, that they'd be free to express themselves, and that their mind would be at peace, which I think is a really strong kind of image to have in our minds when we're talking about violence prevention. I'll stop sharing my screen now, if I can.
Oh, Bryony, that's absolutely fantastic.
I think I've stopped.
So much. No, yeah, no, it stopped. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's wonderful. I was going to just open up if there was any questions for Bryony around that. And if anything pops up, you can pop it into the chat and we'll try and answer them now or try and get back to you. Yeah, I think that just, there's some really sort of shocking statistics there. And I think those quotes at the end really sort of showed that importance of how children need to, or young people need to feel safe in their, in their learning environments, don't they? And it's that feeling of containment they need and they seek, and that's not possible when there's violence, within the school, within that setting. So yeah, thank you, Bryony, for setting out those ways in which school staff as well can sort of address or put interventions in place to help support young people with this, because it seems to be, like you said, with caveats, but it seems to be a sort of unfortunately a growing trend in schools these days across the age range. So thank you, Bryony. Thank you very much for that. I'm just aware of the time. I know I've got there's about 10 minutes. I'm going to have a quickly, if you don't mind, go through some examples of the schools that I've been working with, and some more of the ideas that they've had around sort of trauma-informed practices around the sort of the framework. And then we'll end a little bit, just a few minutes earlier possibly, so I can sort of share our course evaluation, our sort of webinar evaluation with everyone. If you could fill that in, would be fantastic. But I'll just quickly share my screen. Okay, so this, I just want to quickly run through our the TrACE toolkit and how some of the schools have started using this. And I've been working with a lot of schools who have sort of reached out to go in and support them with this. And we sent out a bit of a survey amongst the schools. We wouldn't normally ask schools to do this beforehand, but we wanted to get a sort of a baseline of where those schools are and how they sort of what along that journey they've been on, or where they are. So I'll ask a few questions. And I haven't shared the data on it just because some of the schools are quite different places. So some have done a lot of training, some hadn't done much at all. A lot of the schools had some previous training, especially around the trauma-informed schools diploma. Some staff might have been trained up in that. A lot of the schools had some sort of whole school training from the local authority. Someone had, again, trauma-informed schools had come in and done some training with them, and all this fits really well into those practice levels that we talked about earlier. So, we're not asking, with the training that we have, that old training should be ignored. It all sort of fits together and all overlaps and all helps sort of the schools become more trauma-informed places. again, the sort of the confidence levels within the staff. I'm not going to name any of the names of the schools, because some might be online at the moment, in the webinar at the moment. I won't sort of name any schools here, but there was a bit of a range of confidence within different schools. Some sort of saying that they were sort of quite confident if they had the training recently. Some might have been a couple of years since they'd had some trauma-informed training. Other schools are trying to do it more regularly. I know when Maria and Joe both said, obviously, that sort of continued professional development around trauma and ACEs for staff. But again, some sort of schools had highlighted that if they had one or two staff who had been trained up, if those staff had left or were on maternity, there were some issues around then, obviously, keeping that sort of trauma-informed practice going within the school settings. Also, what they were hoping to get out of trauma-informed approaches in schools, and most of it was sort of building relationships with children, hoping to help regulate young people's emotions, around sort of emotion coaching and how sort of help with those sort of outcomes, and building up those relationships with young people. So when the schools sort of did the readiness review, which is that sort of the first part of the toolkit, a lot of the schools have worked in different ways to sort of set that up. Some schools wanted to just look at one of the domain areas. Like one of the schools just looked at the physical environments first, and they were going to do sort of like a deep dive into that, and then each sort of year or so each term look at a different domain and see what they could do and run it that way. Other schools wanted to do the whole thing. But when setting it up, a lot of the schools found it really useful to sort of sit down and ask some of these questions beforehand. So again, that working steering groups, it's not just like one person to, relying on them to sort of implement. And I know sort of Maria said this about that, the importance of the sort of the whole school approach and making sure every team, especially in a larger, like a secondary school, which is much larger, how they're going to sort of get that sort of viewpoints from so many different people from there. One of the schools, like I said, put a team together where it was teaching staff, support staff. There was a parent governor on there as well. They were also looking to do sort of pupil involvement, asking them some of the questions around, especially around the environment, what areas did they like, what didn't they like, and some of the things they sort of found from there were sort of really interesting, that sort of things they might not have noticed themselves. Especially on the time scales as well. Sort of again, we're looking at this half termly or yearly, and also the resourcing as well. As is there times that this team or this group can meet termly or half termly and sort of get together and decide on what needs to be done next. So the readiness reviews, they all found really, really important part of it. I've got quite a lot on here, but I'm going to zip through them really, really quickly. So yeah, with the schools. Like I said, we've got the sort of the 6 domains in the toolkit, and just some of the sort of ideas on there that they've come up, and some of the things maybe that they want to improve upon, recording on there. So on the left, we've got the things that they were doing good. These are just some of the examples that I sort of picked out, and on the right, some things that schools felt they might need to sort of work upon, and that's with the leadership side of things, making sure SLT are all trained. Some of them said that the training might be a little bit patchy, and some were trained up in sort of trauma-informed practices, or like I say, they might have done the trauma-informed schools training, but it wasn't sort of consistent across all sort of members of staff or all sort of senior leaderships. That need to include governors as well, and sort of out the other sort of agencies. Other sort of the whole sort of school communities were looking at, the governors are really important, that they were trained up to and they had a good understanding of that. And also how good practice is ensured in each sort of team. So some of the secondary schools were saying that there might be sort of really good practice in some areas, but that needs to be sort of rolled out across the rest of the school. The policies and procedures element then of looking at sort of how schools adapt their policies and making sure that that sort of trauma-informed approach is sort of threaded through every policy, really, as opposed to having a sort of a separate policy, a separate trauma-informed policy. It's good to have it sort of embedded within everything, really. So at any time the new policy was amended or changed, that lens was used to sort of examine it, really. Again, I know lots of schools already do this, but sort of changing their sort of behaviour policy, change it to so that sort of more relationship policy, looking at that sort of relational thing, which I know is a sort of theme that's come up through what everyone's talked about today. And one of the biggest things about trauma-informed approach is having that sort of positive relationship with people. Some of the things that they might have struggled a little bit, or things they might want to change. So evidence of sort of, again, getting the learner involvement in sort of policies. So referring back to the trauma-informed practice principles, we've talked about that person-centred, the inclusion elements of it, and trauma and ACE training included for induction for new staff. So when new staff started, some of the schools had sort of trauma-informed training that they can have straight away, so that they're not having to wait a term or two until they get their trauma-informed training. It's going straight in. So some of the schools have used our e-learning for that. The workforce training and support element of things, the training that's given to staff, lots of whole school training. Like I said, the trauma-informed schools, organisations sort of come in and did training with a lot of them, or whether the training that I've done with the Sub Wales. Some of the, like Joe mentioned, they had sort of counselling sessions offered to staff, and again, it's looking really at, instead of just the sort of the learners, but the whole school approach. So making sure that sort of staff are included in this as well, their well-being is sort of taken into account. A lot of reflective practice going ahead. Making sure some things that some of the schools sort of highlighted in their action plans then was to include training as part of induction, ensuring training is embedded and given time. So a lot of the emotion coaching that might have been done, it needs sort of embedding. A lot of schools find that you could sort of, do training on it, but it needs sort of time and sort of constant referrals to go back to and make sure that that training is embedded properly and being used consistently throughout the schools. The physical environment is a really interesting one. And like we've heard again from Joe and Maria about in their settings, how they've used sort of outdoor environments to really sort of support them. But again, use of sensory rooms, and I think it's something that schools are incredibly good at anyway, sort of having a well-being officer space that children go to and sort of have that sort of trauma-enhanced trained person to sit with and go through things with them. A lot of like bright colours being removed, so it's not too overstimulating. Worry boxes, how the school might be perceived by parents, carers considered and taken into account as well. So again, it's not just about the learners, but it's about the sort of the whole school community. Looking at dinner time provision came up a lot. The toilets as a sort of a comfortable place to go, and how sort of like small little changes, amongst these things can make a big difference. Again, the service design and delivery, that's more your sort of teaching and learning side of things, really. Teachers using PACE, emotion coaching, whether it's PACE or wine as well, which is being used, that everyone's sort of using these sort of emotion coaching style practices. External organisations supporting them as well and coming in. And again, it's that good practice being shared. There is a fantastic work out there in schools, and it's just making sure that schools, any good practice that is going on and working in one area or one classroom, can be sort of shared amongst others as well. So it's across the board. Finally, the monitoring and evaluation side of things is how schools look at how the impact that sort of trauma-informed approaches are making within their sort of schools. So again, it's building links. One of the things that came out of it is some schools sort of wanting to reach out and see how other schools are doing things and sharing resources like that. So it's got leaver stories there, which is quite an interesting one that one of the schools I'd sort of worked with talked about listening to their school leavers. So children might have left their school after a few years, coming back and talking about their experiences and what they thought of the school, and like reflecting on it in that sense. And they've had some really sort of positive stories come about the sort of the things they've implemented there. So it's a really good way of sort of capturing that evidence. So again, I'm very, very rushed through that, and I'm sorry. I'm just aware of the times that everyone can finish at 3. So what we're sort of hoping as a call to action, what we'd like to do next, we've got we're hoping to put some road shows together, a sort of a face-to-face version of what we've done today. And we've seen obviously Whitmore and Yscol Penros's schools and the fantastic stuff they do, but we'd like to sort of do one in sort of South Wales, one sort of West Wales, and one up in North Wales. So if you know of any schools or your school setting would like to sort of host something like this and sort of show good practice and hopefully invite other schools to there to share any good practice and see what's working well in your areas and linking everyone up, please let us know. We've got a community of practice webinar with Neurodivergence Wales on the 4th of November, which I'll share the leaflet and the link to in the chat afterwards. And that's about the overlap between neurodivergence and ACEs and trauma, and how the two are quite linked, especially with some of the behaviours that are seen, and how a lot of trauma-informed practice can sort of yeah, we'll support both people with neurodivergence and people with trauma as well. So it's a really, and there's also Helen Minnis from Glasgow University is speaking there, and she's absolutely fantastic on neurodivergence and trauma as well. So she's absolutely brilliant. So I'll share that in there as well. We've got our tips work as well. I know some of the people in the meeting at the moment. Tips is from our colleagues at Traumatic Stress Wales. Trauma-informed practice skills and strategies. At the moment, that's being piloted in different sort of a few of the different authorities in South Wales, and we're looking at they're looking at sort of rolling it out furthermore from there. Some of you might have heard of it or had the training already around that, and there's some fantastic stuff around that sort of specialist interventions, trauma and the trauma enhanced levels with dealing with young people who might have experienced PTSD or more sort of severe trauma, and how some really, really good classroom activities and strategies that can be put into place around that. Our TrACE informed organisation toolkit again is available to everyone. Our resources on Hub, especially as a case study as well, which we're sort of launching this week. It's all on Hub and our ACE Hub page as well. I've got a QR code there which will take you to the evaluation form. I was hoping to give everyone a minute to sort of complete that. If you wanted to pop in your email into that and become a part of our mailing list, we're having a bit of a rejig around at the moment with ACE Hub Wales with our mailing list, but if you go on there, put this, we can send out any information from this and future things. My email is there, davidcurtis32@wales.nhs.uk. If you want to sort of reach out and get in touch, or you can go through the website as well. I'm just going to put a few things into the chat in a moment. I'll put the link for the evaluation. If you could complete that, like I said, it just sort of mentions about putting your name, whether we sort of give us permission to add you to our mailing list, which is really important, and a little bit. It won't take long, only 2 minutes, but a really important part of it. So I'll stop sharing there. And I just want to say a massive thank you to our speakers today, to Joe, to Maria, to Bryony, and to Tegan as well. Thank you so much for being a part of that. I hope this was useful for everybody. And yeah, we really look forward to sort of helping sort of build this. If anyone is interested in the trauma-informed framework, and the TrACE toolkit and sort of applying that in their setting, then please reach out. At the moment, we're sort of supporting people with that and going in and helping with the readiness review and the toolkit and sort of supporting them a lot more there. So again, I'll put those links in there. So anyone wants to reach out, we're more than happy to come in and sort of support you with that on there. So yeah, thank you very much, everyone. I'll pop some things into the chat, so keep an eye on that after the meeting is closed. But yes, I just want to say a massive big thank you to everyone for turning up today and being a part of it.
Thank you.